Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, as the escalating crisis in Ukraine rocks stock markets around the globe, US President Barack Obama warns Russia will face economic and diplomatic isolation if the Kremlin refuses to back down. The US State Department slams North Korea for its Monday missile launch, saying it goes against UN Security Council resolutions. Plus, the newly nominated Bank of Korea governor vows to strengthen the role of the central bank and boost communication with the market to breathe new life into the economy. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Ojin in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We start with the crisis in Ukraine, which is worsening by the hour. The United States is talking tough about Russia's actions in Ukraine, with President Barack Obama warning Moscow that it's on the wrong side of history.
His comments come as Ukraine's military remains on high alert along its eastern border with Russia as troops prepare for a possible invasion. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
Speaking to reporters at the White House on Monday, U.S. President Obama said Russia has violated international law with its military intervention in Ukraine.
I think the world is largely united in recognizing that the steps Russia has taken are a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, Ukraine's territorial integrity.
While Obama stressed the importance of de-escalating the situation and called for international efforts, such as the deployment of international monitors, he also warned the U.S. had been examining a series of economic and diplomatic sanctions that will isolate Russia. Following the president's remarks, the U.S. Trade Representative announced late Monday that it has suspended upcoming bilateral trade and investment talks with Russia. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden is also urging Russia to pull its forces out of Ukraine. In a phone call with Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev Monday, Biden called on Russia to engage in dialogue with the Ukrainian government immediately. Meanwhile, it turns out Ukraine's ousted President Viktor Yanukovych requested Russian President Vladimir Putin use Russia's armed forces in Ukraine. This is according to Russia's UN ambassador, who read out a letter Yanukovych had written to Putin at an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council.
Ukraine is on the brink of a civil war. The life, the security, and the rights of people, particularly in the southeast part in Crimea, are being threatened. So in this regard, I will call on the President of Russia, Mr. Putin, asking him to use the armed forces of the Russian Federation to establish the legitimacy, peace, law and order, stability, and defending the people of Ukraine.
Ukraine claims some 16,000 Russian troops have been deployed in Crimea since last week. Russian state media outlet Interfax earlier reported Russia's Black Sea Fleet had given Ukrainian forces until early Tuesday morning local time to surrender or face attack. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The turmoil in Ukraine is spooking global financial markets, unsettling investors already nervous about shaky emerging markets' economies. Russia's stock market and currency tumbled to levels unseen in recent years, dragging down markets around the globe. Song Jae-san reports.
Western leaders are threatening Russian President Vladimir Putin with economic penalties for his troops' intervention in Crimea, but the financial system is already punishing him. The Moscow stock market suffered its biggest loss in more than 5 years on Monday, and the ruble tumbled sharply in a nervous reaction to Kremlin's gambit in Crimea. The benchmark MICEX closed 11% lower in Moscow, its biggest loss since November 2008. Russia's central bank tried to contain the plunge in the ruble's value on Monday by raising its key interest rate by 1.5 percentage points to 7%. It was the largest interest rate hike since the global financial crisis in 1998. Stocks in global markets stumbled across the board, with investors selling off shares, particularly in companies with exposure to Ukraine and Russia. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shed nearly 1% on Monday. But the European markets were hit harder, with the London benchmark Financial Times Stock Exchange ending the day 1.5% lower, and Paris and Frankfurt stocks losing 2.7% and 3.4% respectively. Stocks on the Ukraine exchange in Kiev fell about 12%, and the country's currency fell to a new low against the US dollar. Ukraine faces a possible default on its debt as Moscow is cutting off aid to its limping economy. Asian markets suffered too, with Seoul's benchmark Kospi edging down in early Tuesday trading after closing 0.8% lower on Monday, when indices closed more than 1% lower both in Tokyo and Hong Kong. The uncertainties pushed oil prices higher, with Brent crude futures adding nearly 2% in London, and gold also gained over 2% to $1,350 an ounce to mark its biggest gain of the year. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now back here in Seoul, the government says the Ukraine crisis will only have a limited effect on Korea's stock market. But the finance ministry says it has raised its monitoring of the local bourse just in case. Now moving on, the United States has slammed North Korea for firing 2 more short-range missiles, calling Monday's launching a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. So why did the North choose to carry out yet another provocation, and could this be a worrying sign of things to come? Yudian tells us more.
North Korea on Monday went ahead with another missile launch less than a week after it fired 4 missiles into the East Sea. The 2 Scud missiles fired on Monday had a range of 500 kilometers, more than double those fired last Thursday. The extended range means the missiles could reach South Korea and Japan. While last week's firing was met with a muted response from Washington, Monday's launch triggered a reaction. Speaking to reporters in Washington Monday, U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said the U.S. wants Pyongyang to refrain from provocative actions and focus on fulfilling its international obligations. She also called the launches a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. The North's provocative behavior comes amid the ongoing annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the U.S., and experts say it's not surprising.
I personally believe that we should be better getting used to this kind of contradictory behaviors, because we have to be aware that the North Korea made it very clear that they're going to pursue the so-called dual two-track approach, meaning that on the one hand they're gonna continue building up nuclear arsenals, but on the other hand they're going to pursue economic reconstruction.
So while North Korea is taking provocative actions in protest against the South Korea-U.S. drills, pundits feel Pyongyang will soon start making conciliatory gestures given its goal to reconstruct its economy. To achieve that, Pyongyang needs to extract the maximum amount of aid and hard currency it can get from the South. Now, experts say they don't believe the U.S. will refer North Korea to the UN Security Council for this latest provocation. Diplomatic sources in South Korea say that since Washington has a lot on its plate in Ukraine and Syria, they expect the U.S. to limit its reaction to a verbal ticking off. Yurian, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has called for negotiations with North Korea to help war-separated Korean families confirm whether their relatives are dead or alive, and to allow cross-border exchanges of letters and video conference calls. During a cabinet meeting Tuesday, the president referred to her recent proposal to make the family reunions a regular event, stressing that at least 6,000 people would need to take part each year for all living family members to reunite with their loved ones. President Park then said the government's new preparatory committee for reunification should initially listen to public opinion on the issue and draw up a blueprint in an open and transparent way. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will address the UN Human Rights Council this week to raise the issue of the so-called comfort women, or women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday that Minister Yoon will give a speech in Geneva on Wednesday local time to convey South Korea's stance on a range of human rights issues. This is the first time in 7 years South Korea's top diplomat will attend a UN Human Rights Council session. Minister Yoon had earlier called off plans to attend the session, but changed his mind because of Japan's ongoing denial of its past wrongdoings. He's expected to call on Japan to compensate the victims of its program of military sexual slavery. Now, the sudden announcement that the main opposition Democratic Party would merge with the new party created by independent lawmaker Ahn Cheol-soo has shaken up the political landscape and raised questions about the main players. Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-gil has more.
The surprise merger between the Democratic Party and Ahn Cheol-soo's New Political Vision Party is widely being seen as a result of the sense of crisis felt by both parties ahead of local elections on June 4th. But more than anything, it has raised questions about Ahn's leadership. The elections represented a major challenge for the opposition bloc, which would likely have seen voters split between the DP and Ahn's party. Political analysts say the merger could place the bloc on a stronger footing against the ruling Saenuri party. But the merger has also raised questions about Ahn's leadership style, particularly because the entrepreneur-turned-lawmaker has retreated from election campaigns in the past. First, during this whole mayoral by-election in 2011, when Ahn yielded his bid to incumbent mayor Park Won-soon, despite his overwhelming support among voters. The second time was in the 2012 presidential election when he gave up his candidacy to support Democratic candidate Moon Jae-in just a month before the election. Ahn's failure to follow through on his promises has raised questions about whether he was keen on avoiding risk or if his decision was just a strategic revision from his original plan to strengthen his political standing. The merger has also sparked criticism from the ruling party, which says that Ahn's true colors have been revealed and that by joining forces with the DP, he ignored the public's desire for a new kind of politics. The two sides are now expected to go through the difficult task of shaping the new party's platform. But there are also concerns on both sides. Some DP lawmakers have said the merger is unwise, while Ahn's aides have expressed concern about how many candidates each party will be allowed to field in the June elections. The DP has little to lose in the deal, as the party needs fresh blood to improve its standing with the public. Ahn, however, is at risk of being absorbed by the larger main opposition party. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Uchin Ju.
President Park Geun-hye on Monday tapped veteran central bank official Lee Ju-yeol to be the new governor of the Bank of Korea. He is considered to be neutral when it comes to monetary policy, but he has emphasized the importance of communicating with the market. Arirang News' Hwang Jae has the details.
The nominee for the Bank of Korea's next governor, Lee Ju-yeol, says he fully acknowledges the importance of communicating with the market. During a phone interview with the Korean daily Joseonilbo on Monday, he said that the central bank has to gain the trust of the people. He went on to say that the central bank has to focus not just on the numbers, but should look for ways to be in harmony with the actual economic sentiment. Back in 2009, when Lee was sworn in as the senior deputy governor, he pledged to focus on boosting economic growth by working closely with the government. Whether Lee's perception of the economy remains intact is unknown, but the veteran central bank official is considered to be neutral when it comes to monetary policy. The presidential office spokesperson said that he has a profound knowledge of the central bank's business and has a good sense of the international financial market.
Yi started work at the central bank in 1977 and has held key positions through the years, including as the head of the research department. Once he takes office next month, experts say that he will be preoccupied with matters such as how to weather the impact of the U.S. Federal Reserve's tapering of its monetary stimulus program. The nation's snowballing household debt will also be a concern.
Yi will have to think deeply in terms of monetary policy about how to counteract the real estate and household debt problems that are growing as major threats to the Korean economy.
The National Assembly will hold a confirmation hearing for Yi within the next 3 weeks. The lawmakers do not, however, have the power to veto the appointment. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Consumer prices in Korea advanced 1% from a year earlier in February, remaining relatively stable. Figures released by Statistics Korea show the increase was the weakest year-on-year gain in 4 months. Rental and public utility prices rose 2.5% and 6% respectively during this period, but officials say the growth was offset by a drop in the prices of agricultural and petroleum products.
Small and mid-sized companies here in Korea are relying more on the sluggish domestic market for growth than on the global market, says a report released by the Korea Chamber of Commerce. Domestic sales by small enterprises increased by more than 4 percentage points over the past decade, while their shipments to overseas markets shrank by the same margin, citing the fact that since 2003, the portion of consumer spending in the nation's GDP has decreased by 5 percentage points as of the end of last year. The report warns SMEs will continue to see limited growth in the long run if they continue to rely on the domestic market. The report also calls on the government to back these firms more aggressively, for example, by expanding consulting and marketing services for those seeking to tap into the global market. Now, it may be wise to double-check sometimes, but people with obsessive compulsive disorder feel the need to check and recheck things or perform certain routines over and over and over again. Now, there are reports the number of patients with the disorder, especially those in their 20s and 30s, is on the rise in Korea. Kim Min-ji reports.
29-year-old Lee can only sit down to work when his documents and files are lined up and in order. Lee said he feels anxious if his possessions are not arranged the way he wants them to be. He says that his symptoms were much worse when he was under the stress of preparing for his university entrance exams.
I would arrange my books in the order of my classes. If they weren't organized in this way, I couldn't concentrate on my studies.
Like this, obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder that causes people to repeat actions or rituals to reduce their thoughts of uneasiness, apprehension, or fear. Some people with the disorder overwash their hands because they are concerned about the dirt and germs, while others check over and over to see if they've locked the door. The number of people with OCD has jumped 13% over the last 5 years in Korea, with 1 in every 2 people in their 20s or 30s having been diagnosed with it. A related survey in 2011 showed that at least 300,000 Koreans were found to have the disorder. Making matters worse, the thoughts and rituals related to the disorder can cause distress and get in the way of one's daily life.
It's a loss socially. Obsessive-compulsive disorder can also concur with other kinds of mental disorders, such as depression. Thus, patients with the disorder are more prone to mental illness.
The cause of the disorder has not been confirmed, but researchers believe that it is due to disruptions in the brain's neurotransmitters. Medical experts advise patients to undergo treatment and try to relax their minds by thinking that whatever they are worried about will not occur in reality, and even if it does, it won't be a big problem after all. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
We start off with the latest developments in the deadly knife attack last Saturday that killed dozens of people in the Chinese city of Kunming. China state media says the remaining 3 suspects involved in the horrific terrorist attack have been captured. All 8 of the alleged attackers are now believed to have either been arrested or killed. Son Jung-in reports.
China's Xinhua news agency reports that the 3 remaining suspects involved in a terrorist attack in the southwestern city of Kunming have been captured. Tuesday's report, citing a statement from the Ministry of Public Security, said 8 people, 6 men and 2 women, led by a man identified as Abdullahim Kurman, were responsible for the stabbing spree last Saturday at the city's railway station. 4 of them were fatally shot by police at the time, while a wounded woman was captured at the scene. Officials say at least 29 people were killed and more than 140 wounded in the attack. Although no details have been released about how the suspects were identified and captured, authorities in Beijing said a separatist group from the far western region of Xinjiang is believed to have carried out the assault. Xinjiang is home to the mainly Muslim Uyghur minority, and clashes between authorities and the ethnic group have left scores dead over the past year. The U.S. State Department has condemned the attack, calling it a horrific, senseless act of violence. Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged to severely punish the terrorists in accordance with the law. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
In South Africa this morning, where the so-called Blade Runner Oscar Pistorius has faced the first day of his murder trial on Monday. Pistorius is charged with murdering his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day last year. He pled not guilty before the first witness took the stand, a neighbor of the double amputee Olympic sprint runner who told judges she'd heard, quote, blood-curdling screams by a woman, followed by 4 gunshots that night. The athlete has maintained that Steenkamp's death was a tragic accident, as he mistook her as an intruder hiding in the bathroom. A guilty verdict could put Pistorius, once described by Time magazine as the definition of global inspiration, behind bars for life. At least 31 more people have been killed in northeast Nigeria, bringing the total death toll from the 3 days of attacks to 116, in response to President Goodluck Jonathan's efforts to rein in the Boko Haram network. This time, Islamist insurgents are reported to have stormed a village some 50 kilometers from Borno state capital of Maiduguri. Witnesses say civilians were shot at and bombs thrown at homes. Washington, D.C. was blanketed with up to 10 centimeters of snow on Monday, with some 30 centimeters more forecast to come on Tuesday. The storm caused the federal government to call a snow day on Monday. Schools were closed as well and flights canceled. Power was knocked out from the U.S. capital city to states as far as Arkansas and Texas. The Malaysian government has launched a campaign against dengue fever. The country's health ministry says 36 people have died from the virus-borne disease so far this year. The death toll is higher than the 8 recorded deaths in January and February of last year. The ministry has identified hotspots throughout the country and plans to eradicate spotted breeding grounds of mosquitoes.
Great Tuesday afternoon, everyone. Well, it's a tad cooler and cloudier today compared to yesterday, and we also have rain in store for the southern coast and Jeju later in the day. So Jeju Island is expected to receive about 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall, and the southern coast will see 5 millimeters of showers tonight. But the rest of the country should have a mostly to partly sunny day today. Now, we will have to get ready for what should be the last cold spell of the season. The high in Seoul will only make it to 5 tomorrow, and the rest of the country should also have much chillier afternoon tomorrow. And it looks like the colder weather is here to stay until Friday, so be sure to dress accordingly and take good care of yourself to avoid getting sick. But the weather should be pleasant this afternoon, so let's take a look at the temperature readings. The afternoon high in Seoul will rise to 10. Daegu and Gwangju will get up to 13, while Busan tops out at 12 under patches of clouds. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju and Daejeon will climb up to 12, and the top temperature on Mount Kumgang will climb up to the positive side at 1 this afternoon. Well, that's all for me today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Well, those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Join us again for more updates on the day's headlines on our next newscast at 2 p.m. Korea time.
And we will be back here at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.